Okay.
All right. So this is the original Polly and the Dykes.
Welcome to the Orwell Corner Hall. My name is Audrey Shillabere, and I'm here representing the Belfast Historical Society. And I do have my summer student here as well, Logan O'Neill. We're here to answer any questions that you might have about Selkirk himself, or about the immigration to the island. We want to really thank Jason McNeil for allowing us to bring this out of storage so that we can all see it. I've heard many years about this painting, and it's a real thrill to see it for those of us that are from the community. I do want to say a little bit about, just from a newspaper from 2003 when this was painted and commissioned. It was commissioned by the descendants of Polly passengers Evander and Greda McCrae. The donors include Robert McCrae of Victoria, BC, Kenneth J. McCrae of Calgary, Arnold McCrae of Charlottetown, and Daryl J. McCrae of Calgary. And do we have any McCraes with us today that are of that stock? None have come today. I do believe they're having a reunion on the island right now, but I want to give a round of applause to them for commissioning it. That's a huge deal. That's really wonderful. So they commissioned a Canadian artist by the name of John M. Horton to create this painting. Now, a little bit that we just pulled off the internet this morning about John M. Horton was that he was born in 1935 in England. At the age of 16, he joined the Royal Navy. He served in the Pacific, Atlantic, and the Arctic. He developed his skills as a painter from a young age, and he created 1,500 plus paintings. He depicted military at work, Sir Francis Drake's 1500s voyage to BC, urban rural waterfalls, and of course this great painting. He made paintings of the voyage of Captain George Vancouver that would have taken in 1792, 1794, all while sailing these same voyages. So this painting has been in storage, I think, right from the get-go. Jason, do you know? I think this has been in storage right from the get-go, has it not?
Yes. Yeah.
So Jason and I chatted, and he was able to bring out, I thought he was going to bring the copy, and lo and behold, this is the original. So please enjoy. You're allowed to take pictures, but with no flash, please. And Jason and I are talking that this should be an annual event, Polly Day. So anyways, Logan and I are here if you need to ask any questions about Selkirk settlement here. We did bring across a couple of books. One's gone somewhere already. There it is. And it's a very fine class of immigrants, written by Lucille Campy. And that's what these folks were. They were a very fine class of immigrants. They were hand-picked, recruited by Lord Selkirk. They weren't people just hanging out at the wharf trying to get away to the New World. They were recruited for their skills and their wherewithal. Furthermore, these ships were very fine sailing vessels, which he had to also commission. The reason he had to do that was in 1803, Britain set about the Passenger Act, and Britain did not want any more of those kind of coffin ships going to the New World. They wanted better vessels. Plus, they had an ulterior motive to make sure that not as many people left Britain, because they didn't want the brain drain, or they didn't want workers going, or the people that paid taxes. So they were trying to stem the tide of going to the New World as well. Luckily, Lord Selkirk had his wealth, and he was able just to, at any rate, go ahead and commission these three fine sailing vessels. This is the Polly, the Dykes. The Dykes was the finer of the three, and Selkirk came on it with Macaulay. It arrived a couple days later than the Polly, and then the Otten was the third ship, and it came, I think it was a couple weeks later-ish.
They left from where?
In Portree, Scotland. And they left in June of 1803, and they arrived August 7th. That's why we're doing this today. The Polly was the first to arrive in Belfast Cove of Orwell Bay.
Isle of Skye?
They included people from Isle of Skye, Westeros, Applecross. I think there were some Uist people there, and but the Hebridean pioneers.
No, I was just thinking that Portree was on the island.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it's a lovely little harbor. You see it now. It's got colored buildings all along the harbor. It's beautiful.
Didn't they have to leave because they were dispossessed for the...
They were displaced of the crofts. Now, what was happening was there was a new agricultural modernization where they felt that the sheep would be better for agriculture into the future than having all of these individual crofters on their crofts. So they were essentially replaced by just having sheep lands. Now, they did go down into the shores where they started to collect kelp, and that was a good business for them as well, but they again had to pay middlemen, so they were never really going to get ahead. So yes, they were displaced in the Scottish clearances.
And that was part of Lord Selkirk's motivation, was to help out as well.
Lord Selkirk is an amazing fellow. I hate to use the word altruistic in history, but this was one guy I can't see otherwise. I can't say anything more bad about him, having studied him. He was the 7th son of the previous Lord Selkirk. So he was not in line for the title or the estate, none of the money. So he did as men of the Manners did. He went to university. He went to Edinburgh and to Paris. And while in Paris, he was caught up in the whole Enlightenment that was going on in Europe in response to the chaos that was there. He met with very big minds regularly in Paris, and they discussed issues of the day. His particular interests were how to avoid revolution, because that had happened in Paris already, and it had happened in the States. And then the second thing was how to deal with people that were in poverty. So he did look around Europe, and he saw that the Irish were suffering, and he saw the Scottish clearances. He'd seen the revolution, heard of it in Paris and in the Americas. So he then, can't say serendipitously, but at any rate, his father passed away and all of his older brothers. So he inherited the crown, the title and the money. So he had his head full of these grand ideas, and he had the wherewithal and the ability to help his people. So the very fine class of immigrants was, as I said, the fact that he went recruiting people. He knew that they needed a doctor, a teacher, person that could run a grist mill, those kinds of things. So he went and handpicked the people, and he thought that they ought to pay passage because they would be more invested in their future if they paid passage, and they ought to pay once they get to the New World, because then they'll be invested as well. They'll take ownership of the whole plan. So he did round up these people to come over. 800 came in the first 3 ships, and that's at a time when the population on PEI was about 5,000. So that's why he is said to have set the enduring Scottish culture on Prince Edward Island, because he brought a large number of them to a fairly small population.
Age-wise, what age was he looking for?
I don't know that. I don't know that. Anybody?
She said there were a lot of children.
There were children. They were full families, certainly. I don't know them. But he did have a very well-conceived plan. As I said, he wanted them to pay passage and pay once they got here. He sold the lots here for a little less than J. Stewart down here at Orwell Corner. So he was able to get the people to buy into the area and not leave. Furthermore, he decided that his grand scheme was that if you've got this turmoil in Britain or in Scotland, why not bring, instead of retooling it and making these people something other than what they've grown up being, let them come with what they have over to the New World and set up their new families here in what they know, so in their skills, so they didn't have to retrain for anything or be displaced. So they did arrive here, and he felt that he wanted that culture to also come. He himself learned Gaelic to go speak to the people in Skye. he did bring them over, and when they got here, he decided that families would stick together better, and if they were from the same hometown, they would stick together. They would have a real immediate connection. So for instance, he put the Mackenzies down in Flat River, and he put the McRaes up on Point Prim, so that you could be with your people. And then he also sold acreages. He either sold them outright, or leased them, or rent to own. It's all documented. He honored every contract, everybody paid up, and that was part of taking ownership too. But he left these lots in between, let's say Roderick and Angus, so that they could write back to John and say, there's a lot next door, come on over, it's abundant over here, it's wonderful, and they would come over. And then furthermore, if they needed a tailor, they could write, and he hadn't come with them, they could write to their hometown and say, you know, John the tailor, come on over, we need you here. So the old community came here with all of their culture, which was celebrated in the Gaelic, and they were faithful people. But I'll tell you one thing, they didn't build that church right away at St. John's, they built it in 1823. Started in 1823. And so that's 20 years later, but the reason for that is he wanted the success. So he said, you are going to need to build your houses, develop your farms, you need a grist mill, you need a sawmill, and then when we're ready, we'll build our church. But they still met in homes to remain faithful people, and they were.
Is that little gristmill below the church?
It is. That is the original Selkirk gristmill and sawmill. Both were there. Yeah. So I don't know what else I can tell you except that he was so thrilled with this settlement. It proved his community idea. His vision and his leadership was right on the market. It worked here. He didn't stay very long. He left for a while, he came back within the year and declared it a success. Everybody was doing very well. So he took that plan that he had and he says, let's go try this in Ontario. So he went over to Baldoon, Ontario, and it did not work so well there. They happened to be in the swampy lands, and it was a 100-year floodplain that flooded in 2 years instead of 100. And then they got malaria, so that disbanded. And so then he took that plan again and he went over to the Red River Colony in Manitoba. That group, entirely different group, they were over Aberdeen Way. They have different names like Sutherland, etc. Not all the Mac names that we have. So they landed through Hudson's Bay and had to winter over there first with their things, walk to Red River, and then winter over into the States a bit and come back up to settle. They had a corrupt landman, they had Métis issues, there was a massacre, there was all sorts of things that were difficult there. I can't say went wrong, they were difficult. So Selkirk ended up spending a lot of his life there, not staying there, but focused on that settlement, and spending a lot of his money as well. He did go back, and he needed to get involved with the Hudson's Bay Company too. I won't go into all of that, but he needed to in order for the fur trade wars. So you will see, if you're ever looking for Selkirk, look in the Hudson's Bay Company books, because he's very big in there. And he ended up spending a lot of his money between the Hudson's Bay Company and the Selkirk Red River Colony settlement. He went back to France by 1820, and he was not penniless, but he was depleted of his funds, and he died there then in 1820 and is buried there.
So how many tracts of land did he purchase?
Okay, so the original idea, whose descendants here? Yay.
One or two.
Yeah. Well, originally you guys were going to Sault Ste. Marie. Did you know that? The whole plan was you were going to Sault Ste. Marie, and in the last weeks that fell through with the British people, and so he purchased 4 lots here on PEI, 57, 58, 60, and 62. So he purchased those. They're about 20,000 acres each, so a total of 80,000 acres. And of course they weren't filled up all with the first settlements, and then later the Irish came and filled up more of them too. So, but ultimately they now are all filled up.
Were there many ships between the Bali and the Maritimes? Kennedy, or were those?
I don't know. I don't go on further from the interpretation that we tell about Point Prim and Belfast right there. But there is a book that's just been republished, The Sky Pioneers and the Hebridean Pioneers. There's a great book out of Wood Islands about the different subsequent boats, but the settlement didn't begin and end in 1803. As I said, they would write back and have people come. In fact, we know of a great song poem that Colin Buchanan did about he's arrived here. Well, the whole poem is about leaving Portree and how that goes. It's a beautiful poem, and I think McPhail's is going to be doing it here shortly again with Dr. Ian McPherson. So do go and see. You will be enthralled. Anyways, Colin Buchanan comes to Mount Buchanan, and he's set up there, and he is just thrilled. So he writes the song poem and sends it back to Scotland, and says, "It's so abundant here. We have sugar from trees in great chunks, and there's red rum in every shop and house." That's the last line of his poem, is about the red rum. So things were really good here. It was very abundant. And it acted as a kind of a draw, like an advertisement to come here. Yes?
Is there a record how much he paid for those 4 pieces of land?
I imagine there would be. I just read this morning some of who had the lots earlier than him, but I didn't see the amount. But I would think that would be something that we could find, but I don't know it.
So his money, his financing came from family, okay?
Yeah.
And then, because of the size of the family, so each one was allotted so much money to begin their adventures or whatever. I'd say it would be an adventure. So then, when that was gone, the money that he would have accumulated would have been either from the fur trade or...
That's right, but he wasn't accumulating because he was spending.
He was spending,
He
yes.
was subsidizing is what he was doing,
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yeah.
And to my knowledge, he didn't give money to the people to come. They were people with wherewithal that had some money, sold everything they had and came over
Yes.
and bought their property here. But he would have subsidized probably the mill, I'm making that up, but probably
Yeah.
those kinds of
Well, I would
things.
say that the people in the community would have probably, each one would have contributed.
A little bit of that, I'm sure, too, yeah, yeah.
Is there any record how much money he began with?
It was not a great estate. They do say that. In fact, Lord Selkirk IV had fought along most of his lifetime about getting greater recognition as a Scottish lord to be into the British House of Lords. So that was his whole journey, Lord Selkirk IV. So it was not a great estate, and I have not seen a dollar sum, but I'm certain that's probably available somewhere too. Yes?
So what was the actual course of PEI? So we have, Plymouth, and you said Flat River. What about everything in between?
It went from a lot, 57, 58, 60, and 62. So that is from here
Okay.
to Little Sands, which is quite a bit. To Little Sands,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, particularly Wood Islands,
And then there's some about the other plots.
yes. And then, of course, the immigration came from other areas later too. So,
Were they unusual in owning their land versus being tenants?
that I'm not sure of. We do know that Lot 50 was a lot of United Empire Loyalists, so I don't know how they acquired it, but whether it was purchased, I don't know how that happened. But we do know there were landmen selling, because I do know J. Stewart was selling acres here for much more than Selkirk did. So,
This has been, I'm from the States, but tenant, not having people own the land was a big issue.
it's a very big issue, and I won't even begin to speak about it because I just have read a number of days about the Belfast riot, which was not about the English or the Scottish and the Irish so much as it was about tenancy, and that is the big. It was about reforms and how much rents. That's what it was mostly about, and we do in the area not speak of it, the Belfast riot, because it can inflame things, and And the two priests, the priest at the pulpit in the Catholic Church and the pastor at the pulpit in the Presbyterian Church said, we will not live like we just did over this riot where 4 men were killed. We will not live like this, and we will not speak of it again. Now, to me, that's a remarkable, remarkable thing, that to this day, we don't have those kinds of issues in our community like the Hatfields and the McCoys, or the McDonalds and the Campbells from way back. But we don't have that, and that's remarkable. That's a real success story in the end. But now I've forgotten what your question was, but I got going on that. Oh, the tenancy.
Yes.
Tenancy, we do know is an issue. It is the thing that islanders feel, the biggest bugbear for the islanders is about absentee landlords.
And skip them out of the Confederation.
Pardon me?
They skip them out of the Confederation, that's why they.
I'm sorry, I'm from Alberta. You talk to me about Western alienation and I'll tell you everything.
Spent the last year to come here.
Yeah. So, but I'm certain there must be somebody here that can answer that. Jason, do you know about the Confederation? And Logan knows a lot about the Confederation too, and tenancy.
Not so much of a tendency, but in terms of Confederation, a lot of what you'll hear if you go to any tourism establishment in Charlottetown is, birthplace of Confederation, birthplace of Confederation. But the truth of the matter is that the Charlottetown Conference happened in Charlottetown because the circus was in town, and the politicians didn't want to leave the island to go off somewhere else to do this conference. And there wasn't a whole lot of interest in joining right away. There was talk of the Maritime Union, and there was talk of the delegates from Upper Canada got wind of this notion of the Maritime Union, and they came down and they pitched Confederation. But there wasn't a lot of interest on the island in joining Confederation, and ultimately we joined Confederation when we were financially strapped because of every community on the island wanting the railway to go in, right? We have a 400-kilometer island and 700-kilometer track. Which is kind of down the way. Every community wants everything to come into their community, right? There's no such thing as centralization. And there's still that rural and urban kind of push and pull between, why is everything in Charlottetown, or why is everything, centralized? Why does it have to be centralized? So we were essentially, the government agreed to pay off our railway debts. And so in '73 we joined Confederation. Yes. So that was the last incentive that was required, that we really needed to get pulled into Confederation. So when we're done with this, you guys are all more than welcome to stroll around the village and take in all of the kinds of activities that we have going on. Kevin is actually hitching the horses now, so we're going to do some carriage rides and those kinds of things for you. So we'll give you a little carriage ride around the park, and you can enjoy some more discussion and enjoy everything that we have to offer. So there's a blacksmith shop down the road, there's a woodworking shop, there's a fully working farm in the back. We keep the same traditional kinds of animals that they would have kept in 1895. We farm the same way it was done in 1895. So whenever you're done, you can have a stroll around and just enjoy. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So if there's any other questions, or just enjoy it, yes.
The initial 800 people which
Yes.
came, did they come on 3 separate ships at the same time, or were they
Yes.
staggered? They did?
Yes.
Okay.
I haven't read very much about his private life,
Yes.
and did he have a
I know where this is
family?
going. He did have family. He had a wife, and I can't remember how many children he had, but we do know we have a daughter of his buried in St. John's Presbyterian Church here. Now this is Mary Douglas, and she was presented to the Halliday family, saying, would you please raise this child? Which they did, and she married a Halliday, and she is now buried in our St. John's Church. So there are other children that are in the history books.
So the Hallidays from Belfast,
Pardon me?
the Hallidays from Belfast?
Yes, from, not Brush Wharf, but Halliday's Wharf.
Yeah, okay.
And so she's, her grave, if you go into the church parking lot, if you just go past the church a little bit, it's just inside the first few graves there, and you'll see the daughter of Lord, Mary Douglas, daughter of Lord Selkirk. So I don't know if everybody knows the family name was Douglas. It's the Douglas estate. His name was Thomas Douglas.
How old was he when he died?
1771 to 1820. How's my math fellow over there? And if that's it, just enjoy more tea and lemonade, and thanks to you, the people in the kitchen, they provided that. Thank you.